D&D books that provide a slew of new character options and a bunch of DM tools have not been very frequent here in 5th edition. So when they do come about, they seem to get a lot of attention and people are really excited about them. A couple years ago, it was Xanathar's Guide, and now just very recently, we have Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So in this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the book, and I'll be sharing my thoughts. Clearly, D&D fans are hungry for these sorts of books, but does this one have what it takes to satisfy the hunger of the D&D faithful? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, my name is Nate, and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. In this video, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Yes, it's finally here. I've been poring over this book for 2 weeks. My review is a little bit later than I'd hoped, and a lot of you have been asking, when is it coming? I wanted to deliver. I didn't want to let this one slide. I know that there's a lot of people's thoughts out there, but I know that a lot of you want to hear my take on the book as well. Before we get down to the review, there is an Amazon link to this book down in the video description, and that is an affiliate link. So anything you buy through those links does help support the channel at no extra cost to you. I just get a small commission from those, so consider using those links when you buy stuff from Amazon. So this book is not huge. It's actually less than 200 pages, but it packs a punch. It is full of useful content, more so than most D&D books I've read for sure. So we're going to take an in-depth look, and I'll be going section by section, sharing my thoughts along the way, the good and the bad. Let's do it. All right, so here we have the two different covers for Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, both of which I really like. This one's nice, and this one is especially nice. I appreciate that they're going with an alternate cover that's not the traditional black of the other ones. It's kind of this silvery pearlescent, and I dig it. So let's open it up and take a look. First off, the table of contents is going to show us a snapshot of what's in the book. You got a lot of character options. The main part that people probably are interested in, it would be the subclasses. And then we also have a chapter on group patrons. We'll get into that. Magical miscellany or miscellany. Chapter 4 is Dungeon Master's Tools. Now, Tasha herself is a famous wizard in the D&D multiverse, very famous for her Tasha's Hideous Laughter spell, which is loved by many an adventurer. Lots of little bits of flavor text throughout the book from Tasha herself, and most of the times it's just like kind of easy to ignore, but once in a while it did make me chuckle. Understand that everything in this book is optional. The book acts as sort of an expansion on the player's handbook, so expansion on the rules, and you should not assume that your DM will be allowing everything in this book, or even anything in this book. Let's talk about the character options. First off, you have this page on customizing your origin and changing a skill and changing your subclass. So the emphasis here is on more flexibility for players, letting you not just kind of stick within the box of what is a wood elf, what is a rock gnome, etc., but kind of breaking out of that a little bit to make your character perhaps a little more unique, which I think is cool. And the same thing is true in terms of flexibility with changing a skill and changing your subclass. Obviously, a lot of dungeon masters already allow that, but having some suggestions for how that might look is kind of cool. Then we get into the classes. Artificer. This is a new class unless you have the Eberron setting book already. It was in there, but there is some new stuff for the Artificer in this book. And one of those things is the Armorer Specialist. So this is a new subclass for the Artificer, and they're these armor-wielding, tanky, magic-shooting beings you see right here. So yeah, that's a pretty cool one. I think a lot of people will like that. So there's quite a bit on the Artificer here. Again, just a little bit of new stuff and some stuff that is from the Eberron book. And by the way, there's some other stuff from the Eberron book that was also pulled into here. Some stuff from the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica and Mythical Odyssey of Theros, and maybe some other books as well. So some people might feel a little bit burned that they're reusing material. At the same time, a lot of us do appreciate having it kind of pulled all into one place. And the vast majority of this stuff is still totally new. So you have some optional class features for each class. These are things that are to be added in addition to the normal class features in the player's handbook if your dungeon master allows, or if it makes sense. They might allow some of them, but not others of them, if they feel that maybe it will imbalance things or make your character too powerful or something like that. But there are some pretty cool new class features that just kind of can add to the game, can give your character more mechanics, which a lot of people I think are hungry for. This book, I would say, is not for new players. I think the people who will get most out of this book are the people who have played lots and lots of D&D, and they're hungry for more little tidbits that they can add to spice things up and keep the game more interesting. Not that new players and DMs won't get anything out of the book, but I think the target audience is definitely more experienced D&D players. In terms of specific subclasses, I'm not very good at commenting on like what's overpowered and what's underpowered. My mind just doesn't really work that way so well. I kind of just look at things and go, yeah, that's cool. And thematically, some of them are a bit hard to pin down, but some of them I really like. And one of them I really liked was the College of Creation for the Bard colleges, which is really similar to something I have in my homebrew world. So I'm excited to use this. There's a group of bards who are kind of the priestly class on the island of Astwile in my world. And it's very much based on the Song of Albion trilogy, which is awesome. So yeah, I was really happy to see that there, and I'm definitely going to implement that in my homebrew world. Some other notable things here for the fighter. There's a whole lot of new stuff. There's some new fighting styles. The Paladin has some new fighting styles too, I believe. And then there are also these new maneuver options mainly for the Battle Master, but other folks can get that too. And then you can get into these Battle Master builds. So suggested builds for fighting style maneuvers and feats if you want to go down a certain path with your fighter Battle Master. So that's pretty cool. A lot of other new stuff I could comment on here, but the last thing I'll say that's kind of meh is the Ranger. Let's get to the Ranger here. Cool that there's some additions to the Ranger because a lot of people felt it really needed work, but a lot of these, you notice, are just this thing replaces what's in the player's handbook. This also replaces the Foe Slayer feature in the player's handbook. This replaces something in the player's handbook. So once you start just swapping them all out, it feels like to me you just got to give us a rebuild. Give us a clean slate. Here's the new Ranger. Maybe you can't do that, but I don't know. It would have been easier, I think. There are also 15 new feats. I liked the feats. I think the chef one in particular is kind of cool and interesting because it actually does kind of buff your party and help them if you cook for them. I also like some of these kind of weapon-focused ones like the Crusher or Gunner or Piercer, Slasher, etc. Chapter 2, Group Patrons. A lot of us, I think, as Dungeon Masters are looking for ways to bring a party together and make them more cohesive, and this is one really kind of obvious, maybe too heavy-handed for some sort of way, where you can actually plan from the beginning that your party members will all be a part of the same organization or all serve the same patron. So I think a lot of people aren't going to like that, but there are 8 group patrons here, and it was kind of confusing, that word patrons, because a lot of them are actually more like organizations, like an academy or a criminal syndicate. But you also have Ancient Being, Aristocrat, Guild, Military Force, Religious Order, and Sovereign. So for each one of these, you get a little description here. Then you get types of this organization or patron. Then you get some perks, and a lot of these are similar to some of the perks you would get from a background, for example. And then you get contacts as well. Who would be your contact? You get some roles. So what would the roles the adventurers might play if they're a part of this organization or serve this patron? And then you get quests. The quests are pretty brief and general, but just give you just enough to go on to get some ideas. So overall, I like the inclusion of group patrons. It's actually a little bit similar to what they did with Acquisitions Incorporated, where you're basically part of this like corporation of adventurers. So yeah, it can really set a tone for your campaign and make your group very cohesive. All right, let's go on to Chapter 3, Magical Miscellany or Miscellany. I really want to know how to say that word, and I could easily Google it, but the point is this. It looks cool when written on paper, but either way you say it, it sounds dumb. That is just objective fact, I'm sorry. All right, spells. We get a lot of new spells here. I think there's 18 in total. Again, I don't know if I have the most critical eye in terms of like identifying like this one sucks and this one is really overpowered or anything like that. But I really like Green Flame Blade. That was a cool little cantrip. There's a couple other cantrips. I liked Sword Burst. Doesn't seem super powerful, but cool that you can kind of use this when you're surrounded by a number of enemies, and these magical swords will sweep around you. Tasha's Mind Whip seems really cool as well. Then you have a lot of summoning spells for summoning various creatures. So some of these are as low as 2nd level, and I think up to 6th level spells. So yeah, pretty powerful stuff. This bit on personalizing spells, yeah, cool. I know a lot of people already do this, but I guess cool that they included it. And magic items. Now the magic items were a highlight for me. I like what I see here. Magic tattoos is the first kind they describe. Yes, you can get magical tattoos, and they have all sorts of various effects. So this describes the concept in general, and then you have specific tattoos like the absorbing tattoo, which seems pretty powerful, coiling grasp tattoo, eldritch claw tattoo, etc. So overall, the tattoos seem like a really cool addition, wearing a magic item in your skin, essentially. And then you've got a whole bunch of other magic items, and I really enjoyed reading about them. They were fascinating, super interesting, some powerful stuff, some not so powerful stuff, but I really enjoyed reading almost all of it. And if we get into this right here, you have Mighty Servant of Luco, which is basically a gigantic mech. You can fit 2 people in that thing. So that's a very interesting one. And another very interesting one is the Teeth of Dalver Nar, which is like this bag of dragon's teeth, I think. And when you pull one out, it can have any number of very interesting effects here, including summoning certain creatures. So that seems like one that could make a campaign very interesting if you're looking to shake things up a bit. So Chapter 3, Magic Items, yes, good, thumbs up, I like them. Chapter 4, Dungeon Master's Tools. This one was a little bit more of a mixed bag for me. Session 0 here, great, I like Session 0s, I think they're important, but man, what took you so long, WotC? Like, there are so many videos on this, there are PDF guides out there you can get for free. There's all sorts of good stuff on running a Session 0 already out there, and honestly, I don't think this compares to a lot of it. So that's my take on that. Sidekicks, however, that I really like. So sidekicks are especially useful when you're running a game for 1 player, and they do mention that right here in Session 0, which is kind of an odd placement in the Session 0 section, but, you know, talk to your player about whether or not they might want a sidekick sort of thing. Really what this section did for me, it was a tease. I think you could easily write a page or 2 on considerations for running a game for 1 player, ways that it changes your game, and things you might want to do differently. If they hadn't put anything on it, I might not even be complaining, but because they have this little bit here, I'm complaining that it's not nearly enough. But anyway, the sidekicks are awesome. They really expand on what you got in the Essentials kit with sidekicks. And yeah, there's the Expert, which is sort of like a rogue sort of character. Someone who's very skilled at lots of things, and then you have a spellcaster, and you can specialize in mage, healer, or prodigy. And lastly, you have the warrior, which can be either an attacker or a defender, depending on what martial role you would like to select. So yeah, there's rules for leveling them all the way up to level 20, and it's just a way that instead of having like 2 character sheets, you kind of have this abbreviated character. Still very helpful, can be quite powerful, but just a lot easier to run than trying to manage 2 character sheets. And yes, your sidekick can actually be an animal too, which is really cool. Parlaying with Monsters is the next section here in the Dungeon Master's Tools, and this one was kind of meh. Like, I think they could have done a lot more with it. Basically, all we're getting here is what sorts of things might you offer to this creature to soften their tone towards you. So, helpful. Cool. Some of it's kind of common sense, but yeah, could be more detailed, I think. Environmental hazards, this was okay. I don't know, I probably won't use it that much. It takes up a whole lot of room in this book, and if you're going into some of these realms, like the Far Realms, or a haunted or infested area, or something like that, it could be useful. You can roll, or you can just choose some really interesting effects that can be pretty devastating for your party, or could be just kind of interesting a little bit more for flavor and things like that. So there's a whole lot on that here, and there's also a little bit here on natural hazards, which is pretty brief. Then we get into the section on puzzles, and this is the last section of the book. I like puzzles. I want help with puzzles because I don't feel like I'm very good at them. But what they did here is they basically just included like 8 or 10 really elaborate puzzles. I want some help in creating puzzles. Some of these can act as a template, and there is some advice on creating your own puzzles here. But my initial reaction as I'm reading through these, and I haven't run any of them yet, is that they're really, really hard. When I was looking at the easy puzzles, I thought, man, I think I would struggle with this in game. I don't think I've ever done a puzzle in a D&D game that is harder than one of these easy ones. And I think I like it that way. But there might be some really puzzle-minded people out there who want some really complex stuff and want to sit down at the table and mess with something for 20 or 30 minutes. I don't think that's me or my group. So that's my take on that. I just think they're a little bit too challenging and complex. And I would have loved it, honestly, if there was just like, hey, take this page and just give me 1, 2, 3, 4 short little puzzles or riddles sorts of things. That would be a lot more useful for me. But I guess these are cool, and I shouldn't knock them too much until I run them, maybe. However, I just can't see myself running some of these hard puzzles. I just can't see it happening. There are these puzzle handouts here, which is nice. You can kind of photocopy these and hand them out to your players, or scan them and show them online if you're playing online in a very COVID-friendly way. So that's the book, and you can definitely see that there are a lot of things I really like in this book. There are definitely some disappointments, but to me, those don't take away enough from the book that I would not consider buying it. In terms of buying this book or Xanathar's Guide to Everything, if you don't already have Xanathar's Guide to Everything, I would lean slightly toward that book. But it's actually a lot closer to than I thought. As I look back at them, they're pretty equivalent, but one of the main things with Xanathar's Guide is I do like the subclass options a bit more, and some of the optional rules and like encounter tables and things like that are also pretty useful in that book. But this is definitely a worthy addition to the D&D 5th edition book library, and I think a lot of D&D players are really going to want to get this one for the character options and for some of the magic items and DM tools. I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below. If you have the book, share your thoughts. If you've heard things about it, I'd love to hear what you think or any questions you have. Before we go, I do want to thank the WASD20 patrons. These people support the channel on a monthly basis. I couldn't do what I do without their support, and even a couple bucks a month adds up to make a pretty big difference for me and my family. So thank you so much, patrons, for your faithful support. Now, patrons do get some pretty cool rewards, things like weekly live map drawing streams with me, campaign diaries of my ongoing Icewind Dale D&D campaign, and all kinds of other stuff. So go check it out over at patreon.com/WASD20. All right, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, everybody. You'll see me again very soon.